So yeah, Conor Gallagher. Look, I mean, as with a lot of these deals, I think there are quite a few moving parts. Firstly, Tottenham really want to move out Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. They've found one or two clubs for him actually in this window, and he's turned down every move so far. So that I think is sort of lurking in the background of this one. That said, I think they would like to get Conor Gallagher in over the line if they could do, but there's a number of problems with it, not least it's not going to be cheap. Chelsea want 50 million for him. That I think by common consensus is a little bit high for a player who's got 17 months left on his contract and has shown so far no indication that he's going to sign a new deal. So whether or not we're getting into a situation where Daniel Levy loves a late deadline day deal, the Tottenham chairman, whether he thinks tomorrow morning and wakes up, why don't we try lowballing and see how far that can get us? I don't know. But I mean, Ange Postecoglou sort of played down the possibility of there being any incomings at Tottenham between now and the deadline at his press conference yesterday. And I think that's probably reflective of where we're at generally. Gallagher, I think Chelsea need to raise money. They've got, as a lot of clubs have, they've got issues with FFP compliance, and they want to raise that revenue. And as an academy product, if they sell him, all of the money that they generate goes to offset those FFP concerns, as opposed to a player that they brought in from overseas. Just how the accounting works. So there's a temptation potentially to do some business, but really the valuation is the problem, because I don't think Spurs are going to get anywhere near 50 million.
Before we go on to players, we mentioned this before we came on air, and I think it's an important conversation to have. With so many different clubs dealing with different FFP situations, they need to sell before they buy. But a lot of people are saying that. So how is this market able to move? Are we just stuck in the stalemate because you got to have buyers and sellers, and it seems like we only have sellers right now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, because the January market generally is a tidy up window. That all agents you ever speak to talk to it about it in those terms. That essentially it's deals that either they couldn't get done in the summer, or there's an issue with an injury, or a player that they maybe were thinking, well, let's give him 3 or 4 months, and then if we need him, or we don't want him, or he doesn't fit into the plan, then maybe we can move him on in January. It's quite a bitty window generally, and a lot of clubs, I think, are trying to keep their powder dry for the summer. If they've got money, and if they haven't got money, I thought FIFA produced a report, didn't they, that in 2023 the record spend for that year across all the clubs was way higher on transfers than it's ever been before, and I think that has had a knock-on effect in this window. So yeah, it's a bit of blockage all round, really. I think it needs, it's one of those that it probably needs one club to spend some money to then free up a little domino effect that 2 or 3 other deals will be connected off the back of it. I mean, we're talking about, and I know we're going to come on to Armando Broja, so maybe we do that now, because that's sort of linked as well, because Broja obviously is another player who Chelsea would be willing to sell. I think that one is linked to, again, a couple of things. One, the need to raise money, but also that they want to bring in a striker in the summer. I think that's more likely to be Victor Osimhen at Napoli than anyone else, although that is a long way from being a deal that's completed. It's certainly he's the player that they admire the most, I think, ahead of Ivan Toney. And so I think they think, well, if they can raise some good money for Broja now, then obviously that frees up not only the space in the squad, but also gives them a chance to get their money together to go and pursue that deal in the summer. But they want 50 million for Broja, and that's a big amount of money for a player who has not exactly torn up trees in the Premier League. Obviously young, good potential, but has had injuries. Needs to find some consistency. He's not always been the most efficient goal scorer. So as far as I'm aware, Fulham, I think, and Wolves are the 2 clubs who've been looking at him. Wolves, I think, are looking elsewhere now. So whether Fulham come back and try and make a concerted effort to sell, to buy Broja, will be the story of the day tomorrow, I think. So really it comes down to Chelsea in terms of those 2 deals with Gallagher and Broja. If they stick to those 50 million valuations for those 2 players, I don't think either of them are going to leave. But if they decide to relent, and tomorrow's the D-Day for it all, then we may have some movement.
Yeah, the impending closing of that window can change the calculus and obviously the leverage in the situation. We'll see what Todd Burley and crew do there. There have been reports, obviously, in the States and America. Obviously, it's on the news quite a bit here right now. Gio Reyna reportedly going to Forest on a loan deal from Borussia Dortmund. Is that final? Where are we at with that? And is there any option to buy? Like, can you provide any other color around that move?
No, well, I think it will probably happen. I mean, this is very much. I think the context here is that obviously Reyna hides George Mendes in December with a view to finding a short-term deal to really get his career back on track. And I don't think it's any surprise that he's probably going to end up at a club where Mendes has the manager on his books as well. I think there's probably a few people doing some favours here to try and get a player, as I say, back on track in terms of his career. I mean, I was at Nottingham Forest last night for the Arsenal game, and it probably wasn't a fair summary of their attacking quality, because they kind of abandoned their traditional approach and they sat very defensive, very deep. They were very negative, but it was noticeable they didn't have, aside from Morgan Gibbs-White, they didn't have a lot of pace and guile and sort of quality going forward. I know they've had a lot of injuries. Elanga obviously came on in the second half. They obviously goal scorer came on in the second half and really changed things when Chris Wood went off as well. So they've got players coming back, but you could see how Reyna could dovetail with Gibbs-White, albeit obviously Gibbs-White plays in that number 10 role, which I think is Reyna's preferred position. But clearly one of those wide positions could be a useful place for him to find that and really provide that creativity that Forest are probably going to need in the second half of the season. As far as I'm aware, there's a little bit of sort of mixed messaging around. I don't think there's any obligation. There may be an option to buy, but I think all parties really see this as a short-term, deal for Forest to give them a lift. Dortmund to hopefully get their player back in the summer, who refreshed and revitalised, and obviously for the player in the short term to start playing games again and really try and kick on from where he is.
Yeah, it's a young man that I think still has a lot of potential, but since the World Cup and right before the World Cup, he's had injury history, but then since then he's just been kind of off the radar for a number of different reasons. So hopefully he can get back on. But getting a team in a relegation battle, not always the easiest thing in the leagues, in the world, best league of the world. But we'll see if that actually comes to fruition and how Gio can potentially impact Forest. Virgil van Dijk, about 18 months left on his contract at Liverpool. Obviously, Jurgen Klopp shocking the world, saying he's stepping away. What is his situation now contractually with Liverpool or maybe potentially other suitors?
Yeah, so he's up in 2025, his current deal. There are one or two others. I think Alexander-Arnold's another one. And look, as much as Jurgen Klopp tries to play this down, it's pretty clear that Liverpool are at a massive crossroads this summer. And there are going to be a lot of players who are thinking now, 18 months. I mean, I thought it was interesting in his press conference, actually, when he said, no one was asking about Virgil van Dijk's future a week ago. And I think if that's the case, then the Liverpool reporters really need to up their game, because with 18 months to go, that's the time you renegotiate. You don't leave it to a year. You don't let a player get into the final year of their contracts because you lose a lot of your leverage in that situation. So I would be very surprised if they hadn't have been talking about it for a while. The fact that they haven't committed 2 or 3 players, key players in that squad, you only need to lose 1 or 2 of the really big names. And obviously the big issue as well with Liverpool is Salah, because we expect that the Saudi Pro League will come back with another mega offer for Salah in the summer. And you sort of think, well, Liverpool could easily, you could see a scenario where a new manager decides to cash in on Salah because you're getting potentially something like £200 million for a, 31-year-old? I mean, he's obviously still a fantastic player. But you could see how you might say, well, look, that sort of, I don't want to lose a player of that quality. And I'm certainly not suggesting that Liverpool will be better off without him. But you could see how a new manager would say, well, look, if I get that money and I can reinvest it in the squad in the way that I want to, I don't think whoever's going to come in is going to want to completely rip up the squad, because obviously Klopp's done a lot of work in rebuilding that team, the Liverpool 2.0, as he calls it. And this is the issue really with Liverpool, is do they try and keep things, try and maintain the continuity as much as they can without Klopp, or do they say, well, actually, look, if Van Dijk's not going to sign a new deal, maybe we cash in on him. If we're going to get mega money for Salah, then maybe we cash in there and we use that money to sort of reshape the team in the image of whoever the new manager is going to be. So as I say, as much as Klopp tries to play it down, they have got one of the biggest summers they've ever had, Liverpool, coming up. And it's understandable that there will be multiple players there who will want to see, most obviously, who the new manager is going to be, but then what the plans are for moving forward, and if they're all in it together. Because I think there's something that has been Liverpool's biggest strength under Jurgen Klopp, is that togetherness, is that unity and that fighting spirit, that cohesion that they have. That sort of high energy, high intensity, that high pressing game. You can't do that as individuals. You have to be united and together as a team. And if there are one or two start to think about the exit door or look elsewhere, then it can come crashing down. So it's a very, very delicate and difficult job the hierarchy at Liverpool have got over the next few months.
Really well said. We'll break down that entire dynamic. Is going to be fascinating to watch here in the coming months and in the summer. Let's go to Arsenal, team that Liverpool and Arsenal play this weekend in a huge game at top of the table here in terms of that clash. What, if anything, then it seems like they need a striker. I'm an Arsenal fan, so I'm trying to back myself out of this. Let me just ask you, what do you think Arsenal needs to do? Unbiased.
A piece I did from the game last night covered a lot of this, in that I think it's pretty clear they need a centre forward. I know that Jesus ended up scoring the goal that broke the deadlock to win the game, but I think he missed an absolute sitter about 5 minutes before that. And I like him. I really like him. He obviously works incredibly hard without the ball. His link-up play is often very good. I just think there's a reason why Manchester City sold him. He's not quite the clinical goal scorer that's maybe going to get you over the line in the title race. I could be wrong. They could win the league come May, but it just feels as though they're a little bit short there. I've never been entirely convinced by Eddie Nketiah as an alternative option. I think Leandro Trossard's a great signing. I think he's probably the second best finisher at the club, actually. I could see him playing through the middle a bit more often than he has. Maybe, obviously, they've got Martinelli to play there as well. But you just think, and I know the obvious one is Ivan Toney, but you just think if they had a real killer in there, a real top class number 9, it'd be difficult to find a weakness in that squad, really. I think in the summer they will look to sign Ivan Toney. I think he'll be certainly where they'll start. Whether they can get a deal over the line or not, I'm sure they won't be the only ones who are interested in him. But I think Toney's where they'll start in the centre forward position. I think they're going to look to sign a winger. They like Pedro Neto at Wolves. And I think they may try and do a midfielder as well, depending on what happens with Thomas Partey and his situation. And Douglas Luiz was the one that they wanted before. Whether they can try and get him now, I think the price has gone up quite a lot. But I think those are the three that they'd like to do. And they'd probably like to have done all three in this window. But again, they are another club that spent a lot of money in recent times. They are not quite as constrained as Chelsea, but they couldn't do a deal the size of Ivan Toney this month. And they were in a position where they needed to sell before they could buy. But they had inquiries for Emil Smith-Rowe, for one or two others, I think Fabio Vieira as well. But they've just sort of decided to keep largely with the squad that they've got, and keep their powder dry. And really, I think what we saw in the Forest game last night was what a kind of high wire act is going to be. That judgment call of we're going to go with what we've got, rather than, because if you think back a year ago when they tried to go for Mudryk, and they ended up with Trossard. They tried to go for Douglas Luiz. Who else was it? There was another midfielder they went for, and they ended up with Jorginho. You sort of think this time they've not gone to plan B. They've just decided, well, we can't get plan A. Part of that's informed by the financials, but also we've just thought, actually, we're not going to compromise here, and I'm going to back the guys I've got. Jesus, world beater on his day. They're paying Eddie Nketiah $100,000 a week for a reason. He's got to chip in on that salary. That's he is the plan B off the bench primarily, and they pay him accordingly. We think we've got enough, and we think we've got enough to achieve our objectives. Over the next 4 or 5 months, we're going to find out whether Mikel Arteta and Arsenal are right. I don't think they are, but they're not going to be far away. They've certainly got a lot going for them.
Well, it pains me to agree with you. That's the challenge right there. I think a lot of us see the same thing and the same problems, and it's not just the Forest game. There are other games over the last 2-3 months that illuminate the exact same issues. They continue to back their guys, which is a good team, a side that's capable of competing, but to compete to win the title and to beat City or beat Liverpool, that's a different question.